Good evening and welcome once again to Claves, the International Politics program. Today's program will look at the situation in Pakistan, and in the second part of the program, we will update you on the campaign which has been launched in Venezuela to condemn the assassination of trade unionists. On the first week of May, while Barack Obama was welcoming Afghan and Pakistani presidents Hamid Karzai and Asif Zardari in Washington, we learned that 150 civilians in Afghanistan had been killed as a result of an attack by NATO forces in the Afghan region of Farah. These assassinations, cynically called collateral damage by the Bush government, are still taking place under the Obama administration, showing up illusions of those who voted for him in the hope that he would put an end to the hated war in Iraq. In many cases, also hoping that he would put an end to the so-called war against terror. On the contrary, the three-way summit in Washington was a place for Obama's demand to both the Afghan and Pakistan presidents to increase their collaboration with NATO actions in the region against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Obama is not only deepening the U.S. military offensive in Afghanistan, reinforcing the occupation forces, but is also extending the war towards the northern provinces of Pakistan. If there was any doubt about his degree of subjugation, Pakistani President Asif Zardari responding to American pressure by launching a military offensive on the Swat Valley, an area which had been under the control of the local Taliban. This offensive has the support of the parliament and ex-Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, the main opposition leader. In a televised discourse, the Prime Minister declared generalized war against the Taliban in Pakistani territory, and within hours the army, instructed by the US, launched an aggressive military operation against the northwest frontier on the Swat Valley with helicopter gunships, fighter planes and heavy artillery. Water, electricity and communication lines were completely cut off. In Bana and Shangla, the war-affected district in Swat, almost 70% of the population has fled in order to save their lives. This military offensive has already created an extremely bad humanitarian crisis. The UN Agency for Refugees has reported that more than 500,000 people have been displaced during the first week of the bombing, and it's expected the figure will increase to 1 million. Many of them have walked for more than 100 kilometers with their families, including elderly and children, to get to the refugee camps where the situation is critical. There are not facilities for all of them, no running water, and sanitary conditions are deplorable. In camps like Madania, the staff cannot cope with the influx of refugees. They cannot accommodate more refugees, and most of the refugees have to spend the night out in the open, with no tents or food. According to the United Nations Refugee Commission, there are 11 refugee camps sheltering displaced people in the west part of Pakistan, where thousands are living in precarious conditions without running water, and food and medicine are running out. Hospitals in the surrounding area of the Swat Valley, which have no electricity or generators, are about to be closed, leaving with no medical attention hundreds of people which are injured. Nurses and doctors are fleeing the region, escaping new attacks. The evacuation has not been planned, and the lack of logistical support to shelter the refugees is becoming a problem for the government and the military operation, which have been questioned. The situation is threatening to become a political turmoil for the Zardari government, and the current humanitarian crisis has worsened the already bad economic situation and enormous social inequalities in the country. The country is going through a deep economic crisis, and the situation of the workers and the masses has worsened under the Zardari government. The power failure across some cities in Pakistan has increased from 16 to 20 hours in urban areas, while the price of electricity has gone up more than 45%. The price of basic food has shot 200% and fuel up to 100%. Poverty and employment, as well the amount of people living below the poverty line, is the worst in the 61 years of the country's existence. According to the World Food Programme, 77 million people are suffering starvation in a country of 167 million. Poverty contrasts sharply with the wealth of President Zardari, who is today the second richest man in Pakistan. He is also known as Mr. 10% for accusations of tax evasion, corruption, and money laundering during the 90s. The effects of the economic crisis and the huge inequality have already encountered its first response by the workers, with strikes and demonstrations over the last 2 years. Urban middle-class sectors have also participated in anti-government demonstrations. However, where the crisis in extreme poverty has hit hardest is among the huge peasant population, as those in the provinces in the border with Afghanistan who still living under poverty, backwardness, and almost feudal social structure. A reduced number of landlords on most of the land, which is worked by the poor peasantry in the most deplorable conditions, without access to basic health care, education, and high level of malnutrition. This extreme poverty contrasts with the wealth and political power of the landowner elite, and it is on this basis that the Taliban is seeking support to advance in areas like Bali Swat. The new diplomacy that Obama promised to use to fight the war against terror in Afghanistan is showing more similarities than differences with the policy applied by Bush, confirming that when American imperialism interests are at stake, no American president doubts about using the army to invade, occupy, and bomb other countries. Far from the official propaganda that justified the brutal military offensive under the argument that the intention is to smash a handful of stubborn terrorists, the Pakistani army is acting as a task force of the United States, persecuting, assassinating, and forcing millions of Pakistanis to be displaced. Everything seems to indicate that the situation is not going to be solved in the short term. In a strategic area, the United States has not been able to solve the situation in Afghanistan either.